I'd just like to just mention that we have some sponsors who've contributed generously to the cost of putting on what we've done already. So Capital Green Solutions and Kingston Management Group, Strata Title Lawyers, Watergate and Insurance Services and Management. And we also would like to acknowledge Digital Storytelling Collective for the marketing campaign and .com for the technology and website development. So thank you very much to those as well. So I think we might have time for a couple of questions. One up the back here.
Thank you. I have a question for Sophie. Sorry, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. First of all, I've been living in an apartment for 13 months now, so new to the living. I was on 20 acres before, but that's a long story. For 5 months I've had a short stay across from him, but aside from that too, initially too, so Miss Sandell, and I didn't vote for you in the last election, but if there was one tomorrow I would, from what you said tonight. So she's spoken about stuff, and Professor Buxton has spoken about stuff, because you said earlier that Labor understands. They understand and they make their policies based on it. If they're telling us too that we don't need high rise for high density, and that your party's not willing to even debate some of these issues, where do you stand to go back to Mr. Wynne?
Well, my state Labor colleagues are not here to defend themselves.
But you said you would take any of our issues back.
Absolutely.
So given what you've heard though, I just want to hear how you think your party is now, given what we've heard tonight.
Well, I think, look, I certainly will have a conversation with Richard Wynne about this meeting and about the issues that have been raised. I think it's important to make the point that these are issues that have been brewing for a long time. The point has been made that this is probably at least a decade in the making. This government, Andrew's government has only been in 12 months. That's no excuse, but it's a reality that this is a government that is committed to livability and has a plan for livability. So I'm not sure that it's fair to say there's no political will. My observation is that there is political will, but these are difficult problems. What we're facing in Melbourne is a disconnect between jobs growth and housing affordability. The jobs are growing in the city, but people can't afford to live here, and so we're having development, rapid development and unplanned development. And I do not disagree, and I think the Labor government would not disagree with you that we need reform in our planning of our cities urgently. And
so you'll encourage him to relist Ms Sandell's bill?
Look, I don't know enough about it, but I'll certainly have a conversation with Richard. I don't know the details about why that couldn't be debated. I know that very recently Richard Wynne has launched Plan Melbourne, which is a 400-page document dealing with many of these issues. I encourage you to read it, but I will have a discussion with him about Ms Sandell's bill and get back to you via Barbara.
Thank you, and perhaps he could come talk to us next time as well, but thank you, Sophie.
Can I just make a point tangentially related to that, in that we hear a lot about supply, we need more supply because the jobs are here and we need more houses here, and that's why we need more supply. But I think we need to acknowledge the fact that more supply has not led to better housing affordability, and it's not led to better community. So clearly supply is not the answer in and of itself. We need better policies to make that supply into homes. Like I said, 20% of the supply is empty, and more than that would be used for hotels. So even if we get lots more supply, it's actually not providing homes for people. So that's not the only piece of the equation. And I would encourage you all to also, I think that's great that Sophie's going to take that back to Minister Wynne and hopefully Minister Garrett as well, who has the Consumer Affairs portfolio which this falls under. But I encourage you all to get on your email or write a letter tonight or tomorrow to those ministers and say that you are here, because there are enough of you in this room to make ministers really sit up and notice, and I think that's the great thing about your being here.
Thank you. Second row, Madam.
I've just got a question that actually wasn't touched on at all tonight, and it relates to the change in the OC Act in New South Wales to something called proxy farming. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but basically some people in apartments can go and get a whole lot of signatures and get proxies for them and virtually hold a building to ransom and people don't have a real say in the building. It's almost like a subversion of the democratic process. So New South Wales have just changed that law. I'd really like for people tonight to perhaps go and have a little bit of a look into this and see at the state level. Obviously we don't have everyone here from tonight, but it would be really good to look into that and see that we can actually have an effective voice. They've basically capped it at 5%, so somebody in a building can't hold more than 5% of the votes. So basically you can get your democratic voice heard. At the moment, that doesn't happen.
You're absolutely right, we need to change it here. So there is a review currently going on into owners corporation laws, and I sincerely hope that that's one of the outcomes. I cannot believe that we can stand here and say that New South Wales is ahead of us on owners corporation laws, on apartment standards, on developer donations, all of these things that Victoria would have been miles ahead a couple of decades ago, and we've just really lagged behind. So I hope that's in review.
Thank you. Just on that, what we'll be putting up on the We Live Here website will be also information about how to conduct electronic ballots, because that sort of takes the whole proxy farming issue away, because if you can reach each person individually through online voting, then you just have to get information to the individual and get a vote back, and you can actually have a much broader base of voting. And we'll be supporting updates to the legislation to bring in controls on proxy farming for the very same reasons you've outlined. But in the meantime, because that might take some time, there are other ways of stopping that undue influence from commercial groups who may hold too many proxies, as you say. So, thank you. One question here, and a gentleman. Sorry for the microphone.
John's my name. This is more of an insight rather than a direct question. In the building that I come from, which is located in one of the best areas of the theatre district, we have a mixed-use building where there's a hotel, there's a restaurant, 130 furnished apartments or thereabouts, and a couple of business offices. Our biggest problem now is that Airbnb is starting to creep in. Council's helped us out. They've actually put one of these garbage compactors right beside the eastern side of the building, and it smells and it breaks down and everybody knows about it. But we need help, and this is what we it's one of the biggest issues that we have now in the CBD. And finally, I'd like to thank Watergate.
Right, sorry, we had on the end of the row here first. I'm trying to do everybody in order who put their hands up.
Hi. Most of the new apartment developments in Melbourne are aimed at a very narrow demographic. About 90% of new apartments, sort of one-bedroomed or less, studio apartments. Do you think one of the reasons why we have a problem with short stay situation is because the new apartments are mainly aimed at a single demographic of people? If you had more of a diversity of demographics, if you had families living in apartments, you wouldn't get this happening. And how big an issue is this? Because high density living is in theory meant to stop suburban sprawl, but the demographic that would live on the urban fringe are just not getting to live in these apartments. So is this an exercise in greenwash, and is this causing the problem of short stay accommodation?
Yes.
And that's at anyone on the panel.
Yes, I believe so. I believe that, like I said before, the supply is not meeting the need. So we talk about needing to have houses where jobs are and needing to deal with housing affordability and sprawl. These are the reasons why we say we need high density, but it's not working, is it? We're not getting 3 and 4 bedroom apartments, and if we are, they're penthouses, which people can't afford. So we could have a whole nother forum on housing affordability. Some of our policies are in that plan, and I'd be more than happy to talk to people about housing affordability, but I won't bore you now. But there are a whole raft of measures we need beyond just increasing supply.
Just quickly, I think one of the myths about high-rise developments in the city of Melbourne is that it stops out urban sprawl. Former Minister Matthew Guy constantly made this claim, and it showed his ignorance totally of land economics. It simply isn't the case, because we're talking about different demographic groups inhabiting these different areas. People who go and live in Melbourne, the main property purchases for outer urban development to young families. With some investor interest now, but young families and some second and third home buyers, they're not the people who want 1 and 2 bedroom and studio apartments in the CBD. So by giving over to the development industry all the decisions on everything from height to building type to building size, there's been 2 major reports in the last 18 months into the building type and size in Melbourne. There's some of the worst standard apartments and smallest in the world. They are not, and one of the arguments for urban consolidation was increased diversity through consolidation. They're not encouraging diversity. I was speaking to a developer at a developer function recently about the developments in the area around South Yarra, and he said to me, look, the government should never have allowed us to build that. Now they'll build what they're allowed to build, and so Melbourne is attracting huge amount of international investment because it's got one of the worst regulatory and ineffective regulatory regimes in the world. So capital goes to the bottom of the pile. So it's attracting the worst standard type of building because it has such poor regulation. So we've just got to, these are not hard things to solve, right? They're not. We know the solutions, but it takes political will to do it, and we don't seem to have that at the moment.
Thank you. And also, just in terms of the We Live Here group on that issue, I think that's a very apt observation, because one of the things that creates community and creates that diversity is, for example, the school in Docklands. It's a very real issue. There's no school here, and if you're going to encourage families. At the moment, you can see there's a lot of the younger, like preschool children in Docklands, and there are obviously some childcare facilities here. When those children start going into school, it's going to be an enormous problem, because there's an enormous population here, and already every morning there's a huge traffic jam of people getting out of Docklands to take their kids to school. So that's a problem. That's a disincentive for people, for families to move into Docklands. And if we want to create a sense of community, we have to have a broad cross-section, not just a certain type of person, but families, elderly, young people, teenagers, all types of ages, and then you get a real community feeling. So those social planning issues are just as important as the issues around the building themselves. So next question, I had one waiting up here. This one here. Thank you. Yes. So I'm trying to get round to everybody in order.
My name is Thomas Chiok, and I live at the East End apartment. Right. At one time, I was sitting on 2 OC committees, and at both committees we have the experience of proxy farming, as the speakers said earlier on. I'll just tell you very quickly what are they. In the first committee that I sit is in the building where I live, East End Apartments. The developer brought in a stack of proxies, some 35 proxies, and get all their people into the committee, and sort of excluded even myself out of the committee. That's their first step. They took over the committee from the majority of committee members in the OC committee. And then they awarded themselves contracts. They awarded themselves the OC management contract. And I'm sure there'll be more contracts to come which they will award to themselves without having to go through a tender process. So this is the first bad experience. The other committee that I sit in, a real estate agent did the same thing. She came with 35, 36 proxies and override a lot of recommendations that the committee has worked hard to bring in a new contract for the OC management. So those are the problems that we have. And I made an appointment to talk to the Minister of Consumer Affairs, Jane Garrett. Right. I was put to her advisor on that issue, Tom McIntosh. I went with Professor Richard Reid and myself. We both went and see Tom McIntosh. he took all our grievances, but that was about 3 months ago. But last month, Tom McIntosh phoned me and said that we are going to review the whole OC Act. This is something which Alan Sander probably doesn't know. They are going to review the whole OC Act. And Tom invited me to put in my submissions. I put in a submission, 3 recommendations or 3 suggestions to overcome this problem of proxy farming. And in addition, I also put in a suggestion to overcome that short-term letting as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Thomas. I think they're both big issues, and I think they'll both be addressed, and I'm sure the panel has taken note of that.
No, my point is that the submissions for that review of the OC Act is still open, and I invite, I think everybody in this room to put in their submissions. Get in touch with the Minister of Consumer Affairs Department and ask how could you do it.
Okay, and we'll put in some information on the website for people to look up, so you can come to a website and we can look up how to get in touch with those.
Yeah, I think it's 11th hour, they're going to close that very soon. So we got to act quick. This is something, again, Alan doesn't know.
Right, that will... I think we've run out of time for questions, but what's going to happen now is we're going to head to the bring some refreshments. The panel members who stay behind, anybody with a We Live Here t-shirt, happy to talk to you about issues, so please stay and mingle and meet other people with similar situations as yourself. It's just up the hallway here, so please stay and enjoy the community that we're building here.